I stared at my phone screen, the notification from Instagram glowing accusingly in the darkness of our master bedroom. 2:17 a.m. An unfamiliar username had sent me a message with multiple attachments. My thumb hovered over the notification, something in my gut telling me that opening this would change everything. I'd been happily married to Richard for 11 years, or so I thought. You deserve to know who your husband really is when he's on business trips. Enjoy the photos. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sat frozen on our California king bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets Richard had insisted on purchasing during our anniversary trip to Milan, suddenly feeling suffocating against my skin. The first image loaded slowly, as if the universe was giving me one last chance to preserve the life I thought I had. Palm trees, crystal blue water, and my husband's arm draped intimately around a woman who definitely wasn't me. My world collapsed in a series of swipes. Richard and his mystery woman toasting with champagne flutes on a private yacht. Richard, kissing her neck at sunset. The two of them entering what appeared to be an exclusive beachfront villa. 23 photos in total, each one more intimate than the last. The final picture showed a handwritten note, "Missing you already, counting the days until Bali. Love always, Sophia." Bali. The trip Richard had told me was a crucial international merger happening next month. As the reality of my husband's betrayal sank in, I noticed something in the background of the yacht photos. Richard's prized Rolex Daytona, the one he claimed had been stolen from his gym locker 3 months ago. The same watch I'd spent weeks consoling him about because it had been a gift from his late father. I switched on the bedside lamp, suddenly needing to see my surroundings with perfect clarity. Our bedroom, decorated in the modern minimalist style Richard had insisted upon, felt like a stranger's space. The symmetrical nightstands, the abstract art pieces selected by his professional designer friend, who I'd never met, the carefully positioned family photos that now seemed like props in an elaborate stage production. I looked at the empty space beside me where Richard should have been sleeping. He was in Chicago, closing an unmissable deal that would secure our future. The future he was apparently planning with someone named Sophia. My hands trembled as I typed a response to the mysterious sender. "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who thought she was special until I found out about you. And apparently I'm not the only one. There are others. Ask him about Melissa in the London office, or Tara from the Dubai conference." I'm done being silent. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I set my phone down, my mind racing. After 11 years together, I realized I didn't truly know the man I'd married, the man who'd insisted on separate bank accounts for tax purposes, the man who'd convinced me to put the house solely in his name because my credit wasn't as strong. The man who'd subtly discouraged me from maintaining my career in financial analysis, suggesting that focusing on our home life would be more fulfilling. I'd been so proud of supporting his success, of being the perfect corporate wife who hosted dinner parties for his colleagues and clients. I'd believed we were partners building a life together. Now I realized I'd been nothing more than a convenient backdrop for his real life, the one that included Sophia, Melissa, Tara, and who knew how many others. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent against the plush carpet as I made my way to Richard's home office. The space had always been off limits to me. Client confidentiality, he'd explained. The door was locked, as always, but I knew where he kept the spare key, inside the hollowed-out business leadership book on the hallway. Bookshelf. The office looked exactly as it always did, immaculately organized, not a paper out of place. His desk was clear except for his closed laptop and the framed photo of us from our wedding day. I stared at my younger face, at the genuine joy and love I'd felt that day, and something hardened inside me. I opened his laptop, expecting to face a password I couldn't crack, but it opened immediately. Either Richard was getting careless, or he was so confident in his control over me that he never expected me to look. The background showed another photo of us, this one from last Christmas. I navigated to his email, again surprised to find it logged in automatically. At the top of his inbox sat a confirmation for next month's Bali resort booking. A quick search for Sophia revealed hundreds of emails going back more than 2 years. The same search for Melissa and Tara confirmed the stranger's message. There were indeed others. But what caught my attention was a folder labeled Asset Management. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, investment accounts I didn't know existed, property deeds for a lake house in Vermont and a beachfront condo in Florida, and statements for offshore accounts holding millions of dollars. I'd always known Richard was successful, but this went far beyond what his position as VP of Operations at Morgan Financial should have provided. There were also scanned copies of agreements I'd supposedly signed, transferring my rights to properties and investments. The signatures looked convincing, but I'd never seen these documents before, let alone signed them. Dawn was breaking as I systematically went through every file on his computer, taking photos of the screen with my phone when I found something significant. By 7 a.m., I had compiled evidence of not just Richard's infidelities, but what appeared to be financial fraud on a massive scale. I heard my phone buzzing from the bedroom. Richard's morning check-in call. He never missed it when he was traveling. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but then a different instinct kicked in. I needed time to plan my next moves. If Richard suspected anything was wrong, he might take action to cover his tracks or move assets beyond my reach. I returned to the bedroom, picked up the phone, and took a deep breath. "Good morning," I answered, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "Morning, beautiful." Richard's voice was warm, confident, utterly unchanged. "How did you sleep?" "Like a baby," I lied, staring at the photos on my phone screen. "How's Chicago? Closed the deal yet?" "These things take time, you know that. But we're getting close. I should be home tomorrow night as planned." "That's great news," I replied, calculating. "I miss you." "Miss you too, Ellie. Listen, I've got to run to another meeting. We'll talk tonight, okay?" "Of course. Love you. Love you too." The call ended, and I sat motionless on the edge of the bed. 11 years of marriage, and he could lie to me without the slightest hesitation. I opened my wardrobe, reaching for the hidden compartment where I kept my most precious possessions. Among them was a business card I'd held onto for 5 years. Jennifer Hassan, attorney at law, specializing in high-asset divorces. She'd represented my college roommate during her divorce from a tech executive who'd tried to hide millions. I sent a text to the number on the card. "Jennifer, this is Eleanor Winters, Melissa Carter's friend from college. I need to meet with you today. It's urgent." Her response came while I was in the shower. "I have an opening at 10 a.m., my office. Bring any financial documents you can access." I dressed with unusual care that morning, choosing a sleek black pantsuit I hadn't worn since leaving my financial analyst position at Goldman Sachs 3 years ago. Richard had called it my power suit and had suggested I donate it after I retired. I'd kept it hidden at the back of my closet. Before leaving the house, I transferred the photos and documents I'd discovered to a secure cloud storage account and made copies of our marriage certificate, tax returns, and the few financial statements that had both our names. I also grabbed the spare key to Richard's climate-controlled garage where he kept his collection of luxury cars, his most prized possessions. Jennifer's office was in a discreet building downtown, the kind of place that screamed serious money and absolute confidentiality. Her assistant showed me directly to her office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Eleanor," Jennifer stood to greet me, her handshake firm. It's been years. I was sorry to hear about your career change. Melissa mentioned you were one of the most promising analysts in your division. There was something in her tone that suggested she understood there was more to that story. I settled into the chair across from her desk and took a deep breath. I need your help, Jennifer. This morning I discovered my husband has been living a double life. For the next hour, I laid out everything I had learned, the affairs, the hidden assets, the forged documents, all of it. Jennifer listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. Based on what you've shown me, she said when I finished, we're looking at both infidelity and financial fraud. The good news is that even though the house and most assets are in his name, Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. The fraud and forgery will work strongly in your favor. What should I do next? I asked. First, we need to prevent him from hiding or transferring assets once he realizes you know. I'll prepare an emergency motion to freeze accounts and assets. Second, you need to gather more evidence before he has a chance to destroy it. He'll be home tomorrow night. Jennifer leaned forward. Then we have less than 36 hours to build your case and protect your interests. Eleanor, you worked in financial analysis. You have the skills to dig deeper into his finances. Use them. She slid a document across the desk. This is a financial forensics checklist. Start working through it. I'm also connecting you with a private investigator who specializes in digital forensics. He can help recover deleted files and access password-protected accounts. What about the house? Most of our lives are there. Legally, you have every right to remain in the marital home during divorce proceedings, regardless of whose name is on the deed. But given what you've discovered, you might want to consider whether staying there is your best option. Do you have somewhere safe you could go if needed? I thought about my sister in New York, my parents in Vermont. Yes, I do. Good. Now, about those cars you mentioned. I left Jennifer's office with a clear plan and a renewed sense of purpose. My first stop was Weatherby National Bank, where I opened a new account in my name only and deposited the $15,000 in cash I'd been saving in our home safe, money Richard didn't know about. Next, I called my old boss at Goldman Sachs. Marcus, it's Eleanor Winters. I need a favor. Marcus had always made it clear he thought I'd made a mistake leaving the firm. Eleanor, finally came to your senses about returning to work? Something like that. I need information about offshore accounts and investment structures, hypothetically speaking. There was a pause on the line. This sounds like the kind of hypothetical conversation that should happen in person. Can you come to the office? Say 3 p.m.? I'll be there. By early evening, I had a much clearer picture of Richard's financial empire and its vulnerabilities. Marcus hadn't asked many questions, but he'd been thorough in explaining how someone might track and document hidden assets. I returned home and spent hours going through every inch of Richard's office, photographing documents, noting account numbers, and identifying patterns in his transactions. I discovered a hidden safe behind a moving panel in his bookcase, which I carefully photographed but didn't attempt to open. That could wait for the professionals. At midnight, my phone rang. Richard, right on schedule for his nightly check-in. Hey. There, I answered, forcing warmth into my voice. Hi, gorgeous. Not too lonely without me? I looked around his office at the evidence of his betrayal spread out before me. Just counting the hours until you're home. How was your day? Productive. We should have everything wrapped up tomorrow. I'll catch the 5 p.m. flight and be home by 8. Perfect. I'll plan a special dinner to celebrate your successful trip. You're the best, Ellie. What did I do to deserve you? I swallowed the bitter laugh threatening to escape. Just lucky, I guess. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. Night, babe. Love you. Love you too. I ended the call and immediately texted Jennifer. He'll be home by 8 p.m. tomorrow. Need to meet earlier than planned. As I prepared for bed, I stopped, in front of the large mirror in our dressing room. The woman staring back at me looked different somehow, her eyes harder, her posture straighter. For the first time in years, I recognized myself. I slept in the guest bedroom that night, unable to bear the thought of lying in the bed we had shared while looking at the photos of Richard with his mistress. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew that by this time tomorrow, Richard's carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. And from its ashes, I would reclaim mine. Morning came with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had exactly 14 hours until Richard walked through the front door, expecting to find his dutiful wife waiting with dinner. Those hours would determine the rest of my life. I dressed in workout clothes and left the house at 7 a.m., but instead of heading to my usual yoga class, I drove to the luxury car dealership where Marcus's brother-in-law worked as sales director. "Mrs. Winters," George greeted me with professional enthusiasm. "Marcus mentioned you might be stopping by. How can I help you today?" "I'm interested in discussing the private sale of several vehicles," I said, sliding a folder across his desk. "These are my husband's cars. I'd like a fair market valuation and information about the quickest way to sell them." George's eyebrows rose as he looked through the specifications. "This is quite a collection. The Ferrari alone. And you say, these are currently in your possession?" I produced the title documents I'd found in Richard's office safe. Each listed both our names, a rare oversight on Richard's part, likely because the insurance rates were lower with multiple drivers listed. "I understand discretion would be essential. In this situation," George said carefully, "absolute discretion and speed. I'd like to move forward immediately." By 9 a.m., I was sitting in Jennifer's office again, this time with her partner specializing in financial crimes joining us. "Based on what we've found," Jennifer said, "we have enough to file for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial fraud. However, there's another matter we should discuss." She glanced at her partner, who nodded. "Eleanor," he said, leaning forward, "some of these transactions show patterns consistent with money laundering. If that's the case, your husband could be facing criminal charges beyond the civil divorce proceedings." "Are you suggesting I could be implicated?" I asked. "Not if you've had no knowledge or involvement, which seems to be the case. But you need to be prepared for this to potentially become a much larger legal issue." I thought about the man I'd married, the life I thought we'd built. "Do whatever is necessary. I want the truth exposed. All of it." By noon, I had signed the divorce papers, which would be filed and served to Richard tomorrow. Jennifer had also prepared emergency motions to freeze assets and prevent any retaliatory actions from Richard. My next stop was our house, where I met with a locksmith to change all the exterior locks and security codes. I also contacted a security company to install cameras covering all entrances, all paid for from my new private account. At 2 p.m., George called from the dealership. "Mrs. Winters, I have buyers ready for 3 of the vehicles. The offers are very competitive given the expedited timeline." "Accept them all," I instructed, "and have the funds transferred to the account I provided." By 4 p.m., Richard's beloved Ferrari 488, Porsche 911 GT3, and vintage Jaguar E-Type had new owners. His Aston Martin and Mercedes-AMG GT were scheduled to be sold the following day. The combined sales had already netted over $800,000. At 5 p.m., I received a text from the private investigator Jennifer had connected me with. "Digital forensics complete. Found extensive communication history and financial records. Evidence secured and backed up, ready to testify if needed." At 6 p.m., I arranged for the contents of our joint safe deposit box, including my grandmother's jewelry that Richard had insisted. We store there for safety, to be transferred to a new box in my name only at a different bank. By 7 p.m., I had prepared the dining room for Richard's homecoming, though not in the way he would expect. On the table, instead of a celebratory dinner, I placed copies of the divorce papers, photos of him with Sophia, printouts of emails to Melissa and Tara, and statements from the hidden accounts. In the center of the table sat a single envelope, containing the receipts for his sold cars and a note, "Enjoy your new life with Sophia. I'll be enjoying mine, with my fair share of what you tried to hide." At 7:45 p.m., I received a notification that Richard's flight had landed. I poured myself a glass of the Chateau Margaux he'd been saving for a special occasion and waited. At 8:17 p.m., I heard a key in the front door, followed by confusion as it failed to turn in the new lock. Then came the doorbell and the rapid-fire knock I knew so well. I took a final sip of wine and walked calmly to the door, the security monitor showing Richard's increasingly frustrated face as he tried again with his key. It was time to greet my husband for the last time. I took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. Richard's face cycled through confusion, relief, and then irritation. "Ellie? Why is the lock changed?" His voice had that practiced patience he used when he thought I was being irrational. "I think you know why, Richard." My voice was steadier than I expected. "Or should I ask Sophia? Maybe she knows." His expression froze, then shifted into something I'd never seen before, a calculating coldness that made me grateful for the chain between us. "Ellie, I don't know what you're talking about, but I've been traveling all day. Can I please come inside so we can discuss whatever's bothering you?" I almost laughed. Even now, caught red-handed, he was sticking to his script. "By traveling all day, do you mean flying back from Chicago, where you never actually were? Or recovering from your yacht excursion with your mistress?" Richard's mask slipped, just for a moment, enough to confirm everything. Then came the damage control smile I'd seen him use on difficult clients. "Honey, I can explain everything. There's been a misunderstanding. Please let me in and we can talk about this rationally. You're right about one thing. We should talk, but not like this." I closed the door, unhooked the chain, and opened it fully, stepping aside. "Your explanation is waiting in the dining room." He entered cautiously, his eyes scanning the foyer, as if looking for hidden threats. His designer luggage, the matching set we'd bought in Milan, remained on the doorstep. "Your bags can stay outside. You won't be here long enough to unpack." Richard's confidence visibly wavered as he processed my calm demeanor and firm words. This wasn't the emotional confrontation he'd been preparing for since I mentioned Sophia's name. "Eleanor, whatever you think you know." "Dining room, Richard, now." He walked ahead of me, his shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit jacket. When he reached the dining room entrance, he stopped abruptly. "What the hell is this?" The evidence I'd arranged told its own story. The photos of his infidelity displayed in chronological order, showing years of deception. The financial documents, revealing hidden accounts and fraudulent transfers. The forensic accountant's preliminary report, highlighting questionable transactions. The divorce papers waiting for his acknowledgement. Richard stood frozen at the threshold, his carefully constructed world visibly crumbling before him. When he finally turned to face me, his expression had transformed entirely. The charming husband, replaced by a cornered predator. "You had no right to go through my private things. Interesting, that's your first concern. Not denying the affairs or the financial fraud, just angry that I discovered them." I moved to the table and picked up the manila envelope containing the car sale receipts. "Oh, and while we're discussing property, I sold the Ferrari this afternoon, and the Porsche, and the Jaguar." "You what?" His face contorted with rage. "You had no right. Those are my cars." "Actually, check the titles. My name is on all of them. And unlike the property transfers you forged my signature on, those titles are legitimate." Richard lunged toward the dining room window, which overlooked the private garage that had once housed his precious collection. Even from here, he could see the empty spaces where his prized vehicles had been parked just yesterday. "I'm calling the police," he hissed, pulling out his phone. "Go ahead. I'd be happy to explain to them how I discovered my husband's offshore, Accounts after finding out about his multiple affairs. I'm sure the IRS would be interested in some of these transactions as well. I gestured to the financial documents. That Cayman Islands account is particularly troubling from a legal standpoint. Wouldn't you agree? His finger hovered over his phone. We both knew he couldn't risk official scrutiny of his finances. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice icy, exactly what's outlined in those papers. An equitable division of assets, the real assets, not just the ones you've kept in your name. And a clean break. This is insane. You're throwing away 11 years over a misunderstanding. Let me explain about Sophia, and Melissa, and Tara, and whomever else you've been sleeping with while I maintained your home and managed your social calendar. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Save your explanations, Richard. I've read your emails. I've seen the photos. I know exactly who you are now. He changed tactics, his expression softening into the contrite look I'd seen him practice in the mirror before difficult meetings. Ellie, I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But we can work through this. We can get counseling, rebuild trust. I love you. I've always loved you. For a flicker of a moment, I felt the pull of those words, of the life I thought we'd had. Then I remembered the photo of him kissing Sophia's neck, the watch he'd claimed was stolen, the forged documents transferring my property rights. No, Richard, you loved the convenience of me, the respectable wife who supported your career and hosted your business dinners, the trusting partner who never questioned your business trips or your financial decisions. I met his gaze steadily. That woman is gone, his facade cracked. You think you can just kick me out of my own house? Sell my cars? Take my money? You signed a prenup, Eleanor. You'll get nothing. I smiled, genuinely amused by his misplaced confidence. You should really read the divorce petition. Jennifer Hassan? You remember my friend Melissa's attorney? Has included some fascinating exhibits about prenuptial agreements signed under false pretenses and invalidated by financial fraud. The mention of Jennifer's name hit home. Richard's face paled. You've been planning this, he accused. No. Richard, you planned this. Every secret account, every falsified document, every affair. I'm just responding to your plans finally coming to light. He lunged suddenly, grabbing my arm with bruising force. You will not destroy everything I've built. I looked pointedly at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. The security cameras I had installed this morning are recording right now. Your choice if you want to add assault to the list of issues you're facing. He released me immediately, taking a step back. You have 30 minutes to pack essentials, I said calmly. Anything you leave behind will be inventoried by the security team arriving at 9 and placed in storage. This isn't over, he warned, straightening his jacket in a futile attempt to regain composure. It was over the moment Sophia sent me. Those photos. You just didn't know it yet. I watched as Richard stormed upstairs, his footsteps heavy with rage. Through the new security app on my phone, I monitored him moving from room to room, grabbing items seemingly at random, occasionally, stopping to punch a wall or knock something over. Precisely 30 minutes later, he returned downstairs with 2 hastily packed suitcases. He paused in the dining room, gathering the most damning photos and stuffing them into his pocket, as though removing them from the table might somehow undo the reality they represented. Where am I supposed to go? He demanded, a pathetic note, creeping into his voice. I hear the Four Seasons downtown is lovely, or perhaps Sophia has room at her place. I opened the front door. Your Aston Martin is still in the garage. I'll be selling it tomorrow, so I suggest you take it tonight. He stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. Who are you? I'm the woman who should have paid closer attention to the accounts all these years. I held out the garage remote. Goodbye, Richard. After he left, the house felt strangely peaceful. I returned to the dining room and poured myself another glass of his precious wine. My phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. Security team will arrive as scheduled. Stay safe. Call if he returns. Another message followed immediately. Financial forensics team found something significant. Need to meet first thing tomorrow. I texted back, he's gone, I'm safe. See you at 8 a.m. Just as I set my phone down, it rang with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Eleanor Winters? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes. Who's this? This is Sophia Reeves. I believe you received my messages last night. The calm I'd maintained throughout the confrontation with Richard wavered. I hadn't expected to hear from the mistress directly. I did. Rather comprehensive. Documentation of your time together. Did you confront him? Her voice was tight, controlled. He just left, with significantly fewer possessions than when he arrived this morning. She laughed, a brittle sound. Good. He deserves worse. Why did you send me those photos, Sophia? Most mistresses don't exactly reach out to the wife. There was a pause before she answered. Because I was in your position 6 months ago. I was the wife who didn't know her husband had another woman. Richard told me he was divorced when we met 2 years ago. I only discovered you existed last week. The room seemed to tilt. What? I found your anniversary photo while going through his phone. When I confronted him, he swore he'd been meaning to tell me about his complex situation. He claimed he was only staying with you until some investments matured, that he was planning to leave you after the Bali trip. I sank into a chair, trying to process this new layer of betrayal. So you're not just his mistress, you're his fiancée. Or I was. He proposed in Aruba last month. Her voice cracked slightly. The ring belonged to his grandmother, he said. A family heirloom. My hand went instinctively to my own engagement ring, the one Richard had claimed was his grandmother's irreplaceable heirloom. I slid it off my finger, seeing it now for what it truly was. Just another prop in his elaborate deception. When I realized he'd been lying to both of us, I did some digging, Sophia continued. That's when I found evidence of the others, Melissa, Tara, and at least 2 more women who think they're in exclusive relationships with him. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know exactly who he is, and because she hesitated. He's been moving money around since I confronted him last week. Large amounts. I work in banking. The transactions looked suspicious. What kind of suspicious? The kind that suggests someone is preparing to disappear with significant assets. Her voice hardened. I've already reported what I found to the Financial Crimes Unit at my institution, but I thought you should know in case you're pursuing divorce. I filed today. Good. Watch your back, Eleanor. Richard isn't who either of us thought he was. After we hung up, I sat motionless in the dining room, surrounded by the evidence of Richard's betrayals. The revelation that he'd been playing an even more complex game than I'd imagined was still sinking in. Not just a cheating husband, but a man living multiple lives simultaneously, making promises and building futures with several women at once. I called Jennifer immediately, sharing what I'd learned from Sophia. This changes things, Jennifer said. If he's moving money in preparation to flee, we need to act faster. I'm calling the judge for an emergency freeze on all assets, known and unknown, right now. And Eleanor, don't stay in that house tonight. You think he'd come back? Become violent? Men like Richard don't react well to losing control, and he's just lost everything. I ended the call and quickly packed an overnight bag, including all the evidence I'd gathered. As I was about to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the ventilation panel behind his desk. The combination is your birth date, Sophia again. I hesitated, then returned to Richard's office. The ventilation panel looked ordinary, but when I pressed its edge, it swung open to reveal a digital safe. I entered my birth date, a detail Richard had frequently forgotten during our marriage, and the safe clicked open. Inside was a USB drive, a passport that wasn't Richard's but contained his photo under the name Richard Morris and stacks of cash in various currencies. Beneath it all was a small notebook filled with account numbers, passwords, and what appeared to be a coded list of contacts. I photographed everything, then replaced the contents exactly as I'd found them, leaving no trace of my discovery. This wasn't just about affairs or hidden assets anymore. This was something darker, potentially criminal. As I drove away from the house that had been my home for the past 8 years, I called Jennifer again. "I need to meet with that financial crimes specialist tonight," I told her. "I think Richard might be involved in something illegal. I'll set it up. Come directly to my office. And Eleanor, have you checked if you're being followed?" The question sent a chill through me. "No, Do it now. Make 3 random turns. If any car stays with you through all 3, drive straight to the police station." I followed her instructions, relief washing over me when no vehicle maintained my erratic route. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Jennifer's office with her partner and a stern-looking woman introduced only as Ms. Park from the Treasury Department. "Mrs. Winters," Ms. Park began without preamble, "based on what your attorneys have shared and what we've independently verified, we believe your husband may be involved in a money laundering operation connected to several international investment firms." The calm I'd maintained throughout this nightmarish day finally began to crack. "Money laundering? That's not possible. Richard is a financial executive, but he's not a criminal." Ms. Park placed a folder on the table between us. "Your husband has been moving millions through a sophisticated network of shell companies and offshore accounts. The pattern suggests these aren't merely hidden assets in a marital context, but potentially proceeds from illegal activities." "What kind of illegal activities?" "That's what we're investigating. But given the acceleration of transfers in the past week, we believe he may be preparing to disappear." Jennifer placed a hand on my arm. "Eleanor, this goes beyond divorce proceedings now. The Treasury Department needs your cooperation." "What does that mean exactly?" Ms. Park leaned forward. "It means we need you to maintain the appearance of normalcy while we track the money flow. Your husband can't know that we're investigating, or that you've discovered the extent of his operations. You want me to go back to the house? Pretend I don't know anything?" The thought made my stomach turn. "No," Jennifer interjected firmly. "That would put Eleanor at risk. There must be another approach." Ms. Park considered this. "Perhaps a controlled confrontation, then. Mrs. Winters has already initiated divorce proceedings and changed the locks. That can't be undone without raising suspicion." She turned to me. "But when he contacts you, and he will, we need you to engage just enough to keep him talking and keep him in the country while we build our case. And if I refuse, then we proceed without your assistance. But your involvement would significantly accelerate our investigation and potentially help recover assets that might otherwise disappear forever, including your rightful share." I thought about the elaborate deception Richard had maintained for years, the multiple women he'd manipulated, the forged documents in my name. Then I thought about the hidden safe with the false passport and foreign currency. "What do you need me to do?" The 3 of them exchanged glances before Jennifer's partner slid a document across the table. "First, we need your written consent to monitor all communications between you and Richard. Second, we need you to stay somewhere safe but accessible. Location where Richard could plausibly find you to attempt reconciliation." "My sister's apartment in the city," I suggested. "Richard knows where it is, but it has doorman security." Ms. Park nodded. "That would work. Third, when he reaches out, you'll need to express anger about the affairs but remain vague about what else you might know. Make him believe this is solely about his infidelity." "Can you do that, Eleanor?" Jennifer asked gently. "Could I?" "Could. I faced the man who had betrayed me so completely and pretend my only concern was his faithlessness, not the potentially criminal empire he'd built while using me as his respectable front." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Richard's name flashed. On the screen. Seems we're about to find out, I said, showing them the phone. He's calling now. The three of them moved with surprising efficiency, quickly connecting my phone to a recording device and giving me a hastily scribbled list of talking points. Ms. Park nodded for me to answer, pressing a button to begin the recording. I took a deep breath and accepted the call. Eleanor. Richard's voice was eerily calm through the phone. We need to talk about what happened tonight. I glanced at Ms. Park, who nodded encouragingly. I think we've said everything that needs saying, I replied, injecting just the right amount of hurt into my tone. You've been cheating on me. For years. With multiple women. What else is there to discuss? This is just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. Those photos. There's context you're missing. And selling my cars? That was completely uncalled for. Uncalled for? I let genuine anger seep into my voice. Like telling Sophia you were divorced? Like proposing to her with the same family? Heirloom ring you gave me? A pause. You've spoken to Sophia. She called me after you left. Turns out we have quite a lot in common. Like both believing we were in committed relationships with you. She's manipulating you, Richard said smoothly. Sophia is unstable. She's been stalking me since I ended things months ago. Those photos were from last year, before things got serious between us. Ms. Park shook her head, silently reminding me not to engage with his obvious lies. It doesn't matter when they were taken, I said. What matters is that you've been leading a double life. Multiple lives, apparently. The divorce is happening, Richard. Accept it. And what about our financial entanglements? You think you can just walk away with half of everything? That's not how this works, Ellie. There it was, his primary concern, the money. I'm not interested in fighting over assets, I said, following the script Ms. Park had outlined. I just want a fair settlement and a clean break. Jennifer says we can handle this without dragging everything through the courts if you're reasonable. Jennifer. Hassan? His voice hardened. You've already retained her. I needed advice. You left me no choice. That shark will bleed us dry with legal fees. Fire her, and we can work this out between ourselves. I'll be generous, Ellie. More than fair. But not if you turn this into a legal war. Ms. Park gave me a thumbs up. Richard was reacting exactly as they'd anticipated. I'm staying at Caitlin's. Tonight, I said, referring to my sister. I need space to think. Fine. But we should meet tomorrow. Just the two of us without lawyers. For old time's sake. We were happy once, weren't we? I swallowed hard, fighting back unexpected emotion. I thought we were. Let me take you to lunch. That little Italian place you love on Newberry Street. Noon? Ms. Park was nodding vigorously, scribbling accept on her notepad. All right, noon. But Richard, this isn't going to change my mind about the divorce. We'll see. Get some rest, Ellie. Tomorrow will be better. After the call ended, Ms. Park immediately began coordinating with her team. Perfect. We'll have agents at the restaurant and surveillance on all his movements. Mrs. Winters, you did excellently. He's lying about Sophia, I said flatly. Those photos were recent. His watch, the resort, it all matches his supposed Chicago trip. Of course he's lying, Jennifer said gently. That's what men like Richard do. The question is, what else is he lying about? Ms. Park closed her folder decisively. We'll know more soon. For now, let's get you safely to your sister's apartment. An agent will drive you and remain outside overnight as a precaution. Is that really necessary? Jennifer and Ms. Park exchanged glances. Eleanor, Jennifer said carefully, men who are involved in the kind of activities we suspect Richard of can become dangerous when cornered. Until we know exactly what we're dealing with, we need to be cautious. The gravity of the situation finally hit me fully. This wasn't just about infidelity or hidden assets anymore. I was potentially dealing with a man involved in serious criminal activities. A man I had lived with and loved for 11 years, yet never truly known. The ride to Caitlin's apartment was silent, my mind racing with questions I couldn't yet answer. The federal agent driving me, a woman named Rodriguez who could have passed for a rideshare driver in her nondescript sedan, kept checking her mirrors with practiced casualness. "Is he following us?" I finally asked. "No," she replied. "But in my experience, men like your husband often hire others to do their surveillance. Just being careful." Caitlin was waiting at her door when we arrived, her expression a mix of worry and confusion. I had called ahead but given her only the barest details: marriage trouble, needing a place to stay. The sight of Agent Rodriguez escorting me upstairs elevated her concern to alarm. "Ellie, what's going on? Who is this?" "It's complicated," I said, setting down my overnight bag. "Can we talk inside?" Once we were seated in her living room, Rodriguez positioned herself discreetly by the window. I gave Caitlin the abbreviated version: Richard's affairs, the divorce filing, the suspicious financial activities now under investigation. I deliberately left out the part about my active cooperation with federal authorities. The fewer people. Who knew? The safer everyone would be. "Jesus, Ellie," Caitlin whispered when I finished. "I never liked Richard, but this is actual criminal territory." "I know. I'm still processing it myself." "What can I do to help?" "Just let me stay here for a few days while I figure things out. And maybe don't mention to anyone where I am. Not even Mom and Dad." "Not yet." She nodded solemnly. "Of course. Whatever you need." After Caitlin went to bed, I sat alone in her guest room, unable to sleep. My phone was buzzing with messages, friends responding to Richard's version of events, which apparently involved him moving out temporarily due to communication issues in our marriage. Classic Richard, getting ahead of the narrative. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and began doing what I did best: financial analysis. Years ago, before Richard had convinced me to leave my career to focus on our life together, I had been tracking toward partnership at my firm. My specialty had been identifying questionable financial patterns in corporate acquisitions. Now I turned those skills toward my own marriage. I created a timeline of our relationship alongside Richard's known business activities, searching for correlations between major life decisions and financial movements. When had he first suggested, "I leave my job?" Right after his promotion to VP of Operations, when he gained oversight of international investments. When had he insisted we put the house solely in his name? Shortly after establishing the first of his shell companies. A pattern emerged, clear as day now that I was looking for it. Each step in our marriage that had reduced my financial independence or visibility had coincided with an expansion of his secret financial network. I had just been making notes about the timing of our separate bank accounts when my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Don't meet Richard tomorrow. He knows you've found more than the affairs." Sophia again. I hesitated, then replied, "How do you know this? He called me an hour ago, trying to find out what exactly I told you. He was particularly concerned about whether I mentioned his business arrangements. He's panicking." I immediately called Ms. Park despite the late hour. "He's contacted Sophia," I explained. "She says he's worried about me knowing his business arrangements. She thinks the lunch meeting is a trap." "Understood. This actually gives us an opportunity. Can you forward me Sophia's contact information? We may want to bring her in as well." By morning, the plan had evolved. Instead of meeting Richard alone, I would be wired for sound, with federal agents positioned throughout the restaurant and surrounding area. Sophia had agreed to cooperate and was now being interviewed at a separate location. "The key is to get him talking about the money," Ms. Park instructed as a technician fitted me with a nearly invisible earpiece. "Let him think you're primarily upset about the affairs, but drop subtle hints that suggest you've seen some of his financial documents. We need him to either incriminate himself or reveal the location of additional assets. What if he's dangerous? I couldn't help asking as the reality of what we were doing sank in. You'll never be alone. Agent Dawson will be posing as your server. If at any point you feel unsafe, use the phrase, "I think I'll try the tiramisu." That's the signal for us to intervene immediately. I nodded, my mouth dry. And if he doesn't incriminate himself? Then we keep building our case the slow way. But my instinct says he's going to try to buy your silence today. Men like your husband believe everyone has a price. At 11:55, I was seated at a corner table in Vincenzo's, the upscale Italian restaurant, where Richard had proposed to me 9 years earlier. The choice of location wasn't lost on me. Another manipulation tactic, attempting to trigger nostalgia. Agent Dawson, convincing in his waiter's uniform, brought me a glass of water and subtly checked my wire. "All systems go," he murmured. "He's just pulled up outside." Richard entered precisely at noon, immaculately dressed in a suit I recognized as his closing the deal outfit, the one he wore to his most important business meetings. He spotted me immediately, his face arranged in an expression of contrite affection that I once would have found irresistible. "Eleanor," he said warmly, leaning down as if to kiss my cheek. I turned slightly, forcing him to settle for an awkward half-embrace instead. "Thank you for meeting me." "Let's just get this over with," I replied, watching him closely. There was something different about him today, a tightly controlled energy that hadn't been present during our confrontation last night. Of course. He sat across from me, smoothly ordering a bottle of champagne from Agent Dawson without bothering to consult me. "I thought we might need this." "Champagne? Really? We're discussing divorce, Richard, not celebrating." "Actually," he smiled, reaching for my hand across the table, "I'm hoping we can avoid that outcome entirely. I've been doing some serious reflection since last night." I withdrew my hand. Reflection doesn't erase years of lying and cheating. No, it doesn't. His tone was perfectly calibrated to convey remorse. What I did was inexcusable. The affairs, the dishonesty, all of it. I lost sight of what truly matters. You, us, our life together. I stared at him, genuinely amazed by his performance. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, hadn't spoken to Sophia, I might have been swayed by his apparent sincerity. There is no us anymore, Richard. You made sure of that when you proposed to Sophia with my grandmother's ring. He flinched slightly, the first genuine reaction I'd seen. That was a terrible mistake. Sophia meant nothing to me. None of them did. They were distractions, stupid ego boosts during stressful periods at work. Work, I repeated, seizing. The opening Ms. Park had prepared me for. "Let's talk about your work, Richard. All those late nights, all those international trips that somehow never seem to produce phone records or hotel receipts in the cities you claim to be visiting." His eyes narrowed slightly, his jaw tightening. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm simply pointing out that there seem to be significant gaps between what you've told me about your professional life and reality." The champagne arrived, and Richard used the interruption to recalibrate. Once Agent Dawson had retreated, he leaned forward, his voice lowered confidentially. "Ellie, there are aspects of my work that I couldn't share with you. Confidential client, matters, sensitive transactions. I was protecting you by keeping you separate from certain business dealings." "Protecting me? Or protecting yourself?" He took a slow sip of champagne, studying me over the rim of his glass. "Perhaps both. The financial world can be complicated. Not everything fits neatly into regulatory boxes." In my ear, Ms. Park whispered, "Good. Keep him on this track. Complicated enough to require offshore accounts? Shell companies? Foreign real estate? Holdings?" Richard set down his glass, his expression hardening. "You've been busy, haven't you? Going through my private files, making assumptions about things you don't understand. I understand numbers, Richard. I always have. It's why you wanted me to leave my job, isn't it? You were worried I might connect the dots. That's absurd. I wanted you to leave because you were working yourself into the ground. I was concerned about your well-being. What about the Cayman account? The one you opened 3 weeks after convincing me to combine and then separate our finances. Was that for my well-being too? For the first time, real alarm flashed in his eyes. Lower your voice, he hissed, glancing around the restaurant. This isn't the place to discuss personal finances. Why not? Afraid someone might overhear something. Problematic? Something that might interest the IRS or Treasury Department? Richard's demeanor changed instantly, the remorseful husband vanishing, replaced by something colder and more calculating. He straightened in his seat, adjusting his tie, in a gesture I now recognized as his tell when preparing to switch tactics. All right, Eleanor, let's be direct with each other. You found some financial arrangements you don't understand and jumped to conclusions. Rather than creating a public spectacle or involving government agencies that will waste everyone's time, why don't we discuss a settlement? A settlement? Yes. Something equitable that acknowledges your contributions to our marriage while respecting the complexity of our situation. I took a sip of water, playing for time as Ms. Park whispered instructions in my ear. I'm listening. Richard pulled a folded document from his inner jacket pocket and slid it across the table. A preliminary proposal. I'm prepared to offer you $5 million, the property in Vermont, and a monthly stipend of $20,000 for the next 10 years. In exchange, you sign a comprehensive confidentiality agreement and withdraw the divorce petition. In favor of a private separation agreement. I glanced at the document without touching it. $5 million was a substantial sum, but nothing compared to what I now knew he had hidden away. That seems rather generous for a man who insisted on a prenup limiting me to a lump sum of $1 million in case of divorce. The prenup was standard legal precaution. This offer reflects my genuine desire to ensure you're well taken care of. And if I refuse? His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A coldness that sent a chill down my spine. Then, things become unnecessarily complicated for everyone involved. Protracted legal battles, potential audits, public scrutiny of our private lives. Nobody wins in that scenario, Ellie. Sounds like a threat. A reality check. I have resources and contingency plans you know nothing about. Push this, and you'll find yourself with nothing but legal bills and regrets. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Or you can sign this agreement, walk away with $5 million and start fresh. Your choice. In my ear, Ms. Park was practically buzzing with excitement. Perfect. He's basically admitted to hiding assets and threatening you to conceal them. Keep him talking. I picked up the document, pretending to skim its contents. What about the properties in Florida and the Bahamas? And the account in Zurich? Richard's composure slipped just for a moment. You're fishing. Whatever you think you found, I assure you it's not what you imagine. No? Then explain it to me. Help me understand why my supposedly successful but not extraordinarily wealthy husband has tens of millions hidden in international accounts. Explain the shell companies, the property transactions, the quarterly wire transfers to numbered accounts that coincide precisely with your business trips. His hand clenched around his champagne flute, knuckles whitening. You have no idea what you're getting into, Eleanor. But I do. That's what scares you, isn't it? That I've finally put together the pieces. That I know exactly who and what you are. Richard set down his glass deliberately and stood up. This meeting is over. My offer expires in 24 hours. After that, all terms are off the table. He tossed several $100 bills onto the table. I suggest you think very carefully about your next steps. As he walked away, I heard Ms. Park in my earpiece. Let him go. We've got what we needed. Agents will follow him. Meet us at the extraction point in 5 minutes. I waited until Richard A. had left the restaurant, then gathered my belongings and headed toward the ladies' room as instructed. Inside, Agent Dawson was waiting by an employee exit. "This way, Mrs. Winters. Quickly now." Within minutes, I was in the back of an unmarked sedan, being driven to a secure location while Ms. Park debriefed me via speakerphone. Excellent work. He practically confirmed the existence of hidden assets and made what any court would interpret as a thinly veiled threat. Combined with Ms. Reeves's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, we have enough to secure warrants for his accounts, devices, and properties. "What happens now?" I asked, watching the city streets blur past the window. "Now we move fast." Based on his reaction, Richard is likely to attempt to move or liquidate assets immediately. We need to freeze everything before he can. And me? What do I do? For the next 24 hours, maintain the illusion that you're considering his offer. Text him that you're thinking it over. Then meet us tomorrow morning to sign the formal complaints that will trigger the asset seizures and criminal investigation. After ending the call, I leaned back against the seat, suddenly exhausted. In less than 48 hours, my life had completely unraveled, revealing a truth more sinister than I could have imagined. The man I had loved and trusted for 11 years wasn't just an unfaithful husband. He was potentially a criminal, involved in financial schemes serious enough to warrant federal investigation. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Have you thought about my offer? Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Following Ms. Park's instructions, I responded, "I need time to review everything with my lawyer. We'll get back to you tomorrow." His reply was immediate. "Don't involve Hassan in this. She doesn't understand the complexities. This offer is just between us." I didn't respond, setting my phone aside as the car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a nondescript office building. Agent Rodriguez was waiting for me at the elevator. "Ms. Park is upstairs with your attorney and Ms. Reeves," she explained as we ascended. "There have been some developments." The elevator opened directly into a conference room where Jennifer, Ms. Park, and Sophia Reeves were gathered around a table covered with documents. Sophia looked up as I entered, her expression a complex mixture of emotions I understood all too well. "Eleanor," she said, standing to greet me. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Up close, she was younger than I'd expected, perhaps early 30s, with the polished appearance of someone who worked in a professional environment. I could see why Richard had been attracted to her. She exuded the same confident competence I once had, before years with Richard had dimmed my professional identity. "Ms. Reeves has been extremely helpful," Ms. Park explained. "Her position at First Atlantic Bank gave her access to transaction records that corroborate our suspicions about your husband's activities." "What exactly is he involved in?" I asked, taking a seat at the table. The three women exchanged glances before Jennifer spoke. "Based on what we've pieced together, Richard appears to be facilitating the movement of funds for several high-net-worth foreign nationals, disguising the sources and destinations through a complex network of shell companies and property investments." "Money laundering," I said flatly. "Among other things," Ms. Park confirmed. "We believe he's been using his position at Morgan Financial to identify potential clients with specific needs. Individuals who require large sums moved across international borders without regulatory scrutiny." "And his personal life?" I glanced at Sophia. "The affairs, the multiple relationships, how does that fit in?" Sophia clasped her hands tightly on the table. "I've been asking myself the same question. At first, I thought it was just the behavior of a practiced liar, someone who compartmentalizes different aspects of his life. But now I wonder if there wasn't a more practical purpose. Meaning? Multiple residences under different romantic pretenses, Ms. Park explained. Properties that wouldn't raise suspicion because they appeared to be love nests rather than business. Assets. Women who provided social alibis without realizing it. We were cover stories, Sophia said bitterly. Convenient explanations for his movements and expenditures. I thought about all the times Richard had insisted I not join him on business trips, all the properties he'd mentioned buying as investment opportunities that I'd never seen. The pattern was unmistakable once I could see the full picture. The question now, Jennifer said gently, is how we proceed. Legally, you have options, Eleanor. You can cooperate fully with the federal investigation, which may provide the best outcome in terms of asset recovery, but will certainly become public. Or you can pursue a quieter resolution focused primarily on your divorce and financial settlement. Before I could respond, Agent Rodriguez entered the room, her expression urgent. We have a problem. Richard Winters just booked a private flight to Caracas, departing in 3 hours. And he's liquidating accounts, massive withdrawals across multiple institutions in the last 30 minutes. Ms. Park was immediately on her feet. He's running. We need those warrants now. What about Eleanor? Jennifer demanded. If he's desperate enough to flee, he might see her as a threat that needs to be eliminated first. I'm putting a protection detail on her immediately, Ms. Park assured her, already dialing. And we're accelerating everything. No more waiting until tomorrow. As the room erupted into activity, I sat motionless, watching these professionals scramble to contain the fallout from my disintegrating marriage. Across the table, Sophia caught my eye, her expression mirroring what I felt, a stunned recognition that the man we had both loved was capable of far more deception than either of us had imagined. He's not going to go quietly, she said quietly. No, I agreed. He isn't. Outside the conference room windows, storm clouds were gathering over the city skyline, an appropriate backdrop for the chaos unfolding in my life. The comfortable illusion of my marriage had been shattered beyond repair, revealing a truth more dangerous than mere infidelity. Richard was running, and if we didn't stop him, he'd disappear with everything. We need to move you immediately, Agent Rodriguez announced, returning to the conference room with 2 additional agents. Richard's flight plan may be a diversion. We have intelligence suggesting he might be planning to tie up loose ends before leaving the country. Loose ends? My stomach tightened with understanding. You mean me? And potentially Ms. Reeves, Ms. Park added, glancing at Sophia. You both represent significant liability to him now. Jennifer gathered my documents quickly. Where are you taking them? Secure location, Rodriguez replied tersely. Need to know basis only. We'll keep you updated through secure channels. Within minutes, Sophia and I were being escorted to the parking garage, flanked by agents scanning our surroundings with practiced vigilance. The storm had broken outside, rain lashing against the building's windows as thunder rolled across the sky. Stay between us, Rodriguez instructed as we approached an armored SUV. Move quickly, but don't run. We had just reached the vehicle when the lights in the garage flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness broken only by emergency exit signs and the agents' flashlights. This isn't a coincidence, Rodriguez muttered, drawing her weapon. Into the vehicle now! We scrambled inside as the agents formed a protective perimeter. Through the reinforced windows, I could make out shadowy figures moving between parked cars at the far end of the garage. Federal agents, Rodriguez called out. Identify yourselves. The response came in the form of gunfire, bullets pinging harmlessly against our armored vehicle. Get down, Rodriguez shouted, dropping into the driver's seat and starting the engine. The SUV roared to life, tires squealing as we accelerated toward the exit, agents returning fire behind us. Beside me on the floor of the back seat, Sophia was breathing rapidly, her eyes wide with shock. This is insane, she whispered. This can't be happening. Rodriguez, I called to the front seat. Was that Richard? Unlikely, she replied, navigating the vehicle up the exit ramp at dangerous speed. More likely hired muscle. Your husband probably has connections to people who handle this kind of work. Richard wouldn't, I began, then stopped myself. 2 days ago, I would have sworn Richard was incapable of infidelity. My certainty about what he would or wouldn't do had evaporated completely. We emerged onto the rain-soaked street, immediately joining the flow of traffic as Rodriguez communicated rapidly through her earpiece. Eagle and Sparrow secure. Proceeding. To alternate location. Hostiles engaged in garage level B2, requesting backup and scene containment. Eagle and Sparrow? Sophia asked. That's us, Rodriguez explained, making a sharp turn down a side street. Your code names for the operation. We need to assume all communications might be compromised. For the next 30 minutes, we zigzagged through the city, using a pattern designed to identify and lose any potential tails. Eventually, we pulled into another underground garage, this one beneath a residential building in a quiet neighborhood. Safe house, Rodriguez explained as we were hurriedly escorted to a service elevator. You'll stay here until we've neutralized the immediate threat. The apartment was bland and impersonal, clearly designed for function rather than comfort. Kevlar blinds covered the windows, and I noticed surveillance equipment discreetly positioned throughout the space. 2 additional agents were already inside, monitoring camera feeds that showed the building's entrances and surrounding streets. Make yourselves comfortable, Rodriguez said, gesturing to the sparse living area. This could take a while. While the agents established a security perimeter and communications protocols, Sophia and I sat awkwardly on opposite ends of a functional gray sofa. The surreal nature of our situation, 2 women connected by the same deceitful man, now hiding together from potential assassins, might have been almost comedic under different circumstances. I never thought it would come to this, Sophia finally said, breaking the silence between us. When I sent you those photos, I just wanted you to know the truth. I never imagined that Richard was potentially a criminal mastermind with hired gunmen at his disposal. I finished for her. Joined the club, 11 years of marriage, and I had no idea who I was really living with. She studied me with sympathetic curiosity. How did you not see any signs? I mean, I only knew him for 2 years, and I had moments of suspicion about his business dealings. The question stung, but it was fair. He compartmentalized everything perfectly. His work life was entirely separate from our home life, and he was careful to discourage my interest in finances once. We were married. Classic isolation tactic, Rodriguez commented, overhearing our conversation as she checked the apartment's security systems. Men like your husband identify independent-minded partners, then systematically undermine their confidence and connections until they're isolated and dependent. I thought about how skillfully Richard had separated me from my career, my financial independence, even my closest friends who had too many opinions about our relationship. It had happened so gradually. I hadn't recognized the pattern until now. Ms. Park is on secure line 1, announced one of the monitoring agents, holding out a phone. Rodriguez took the call, her expression growing increasingly grim as she listened. When she hung up, she turned to us with disturbing news. Richard. Winters has disappeared. He never showed up for his Caracas flight, and all known surveillance points have lost visual contact. However, we've confirmed the men in the garage were professional contractors with ties to an international security firm often used by Morgan Financial for special projects. So Richard sent them, I said flatly. It appears so. The good news is we've successfully frozen most of his known accounts and properties. The bad news is we believe he had contingency plans and resources we haven't yet identified. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. I know where he's going. Need to talk privately. Not safe to text details. SRSR Sarah Reynolds, Richard's executive assistant for the past 5 years. I showed the message to Rodriguez, who immediately began tracing the number. Could be legitimate, she mused. Could also be a trap. Sarah Reynolds has been interviewed twice about your husband's activities, but claimed no knowledge of his personal affairs or financial irregularities. She's lying, Sophia interjected. Sarah knew about me. She arranged our accidental meeting at a charity event Richard was attending. She's helped him maintain his double life. Rodriguez considered this information. We'll bring her in for questioning. In the meantime, don't respond to that message. My phone buzzed again. Eleanor, it's urgent. I know about the lake house. The real lake house. Richard is headed there now with everything he could liquidate. You have maybe 3 hours before he's gone for good. Lake house? Rodriguez questioned, reading over my shoulder. We have a property in Vermont, I explained. But it's one of the assets that's been frozen. The real lake house, Sophia repeated thoughtfully. Could there be another property you don't know about? Something clicked in my memory. A conversation overheard years ago between Richard and someone on the phone. The New Hampshire situation is handled. No paper trail, completely secure. I'd assumed it was business-related, but now... Check property records in New Hampshire, I suggested, particularly around Lake Winnipesaukee. That's where Richard always said he wanted to retire. Someday? Rodriguez relayed the information to her team, and within 20 minutes, we had our answer. Property purchased 4 years ago through a shell corporation called Lakeside Ventures, reported the analyst on the phone. Paid for in cash, maintained through a property management company that specializes in discretion for high net worth clients. No connection to Richard Winters in any official documentation, but the utility bills are paid through an account we've linked to his network. That's got to be it, I said. But how would Sarah know about this place if it's so carefully hidden? Perhaps she's more involved than we realized, Rodriguez suggested. She might be trying to save herself by offering him up. Or it's a trap, Sophia countered. Richard could be using her to lure Eleanor out. Rodriguez made a decision. We'll send a tactical team to the lake house immediately. If he's there, we'll apprehend him. If not, we haven't lost anything. And if it is a trap, I asked, then we'll be ready for that too. But you two stay here, secure and out of sight. As Rodriguez coordinated with her team, my phone buzzed yet again. This time it was Richard himself. We need to talk. No authorities, just you and me. I can explain everything. Meet me at our special place in 1 hour, or I disappear forever, with everything. Last chance, Ellie. Our special place. He could only mean one location, the botanical garden where we'd had our first date. It was public enough to make him feel safe from ambush, yet private enough in certain sections for a discreet conversation. I showed Rodriguez the message. He's not at the lake house. This is misdirection. Agreed. He's trying to separate you from protection. She thought for a moment. This gives us an opportunity, but it's risky. If you agreed to meet him, we could set up a sting operation. No. Sophia interjected forcefully. He's too dangerous, too desperate. He wouldn't hesitate to hurt Eleanor if he felt cornered. She's right, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. The Richard I knew might not have been capable of violence, but this Richard, the real one, is a stranger to me. I'm not willing to bet my life on his restraint. Rodriguez nodded. Then we maintain our original plan. The tactical team will check the lake house while we keep you both secure. For the next hour, we waited in tense silence, monitoring communications as field teams mobilized. My thoughts swirled with memories of my life with Richard, each one now tainted by the knowledge of his true nature. Had any of it been real? Or had I simply been a convenient cover for his activities, a respectable facade behind which he hid his criminal enterprises? Tactical team is approaching the lake house property, announced one of the monitoring agents. No visible activity, but there's a vehicle matching the description of Winter's Aston Martin parked in the garage. We clustered around the surveillance feed being transmitted from the team leader's body camera. The lake house was modern and luxurious, secluded among tall pines with a private dock extending into the water. Exactly the kind of place Richard had always claimed to want. Team moving in, came the crackling report. Perimeter secure, entering through rear entrance. We watched tensely as the tactical team methodically cleared the house, room by room. The property was immaculate but showed signs of recent occupation. A half-empty coffee cup on the counter, a laptop left open on the desk in the study. "Sir, you're going to want to see this," called one agent from what appeared to be the master bedroom. The camera swung around to show a wall safe standing open and empty, its contents apparently removed in haste. Beside it lay a phone, Richard's phone, with a note taped to its screen. "Too late. Goodbye, Ellie." "He's gone," Rodriguez said grimly. "The lake house was a temporary stop. He's left the phone to throw us off his trail." "Check the dock," I suggested, a sinking feeling in my stomach. "See if there's a boat." The camera moved through the house to the lakeside doors, revealing an empty boat slip where a vessel should have been. "Water escape," Rodriguez confirmed. "Smart. No road checkpoints to worry about. He could be anywhere by now." My phone buzzed one final time. "I gave you every chance, Eleanor. Remember that in the years ahead. You could have had 5 million and a comfortable life. Now you'll have nothing but regrets and federal agents as companions. I built contingencies you'll never find. Goodbye." I showed the message to Rodriguez, who immediately began tracing its origin. "He's taunting us," she said. "But every communication helps us narrow down his location. He's still in the country, or this message wouldn't have come through on standard cellular networks." "What happens now?" Sophia asked, voicing the question in my mind. "Now we adapt," Rodriguez replied. "We've frozen most of his known assets. We have evidence of his financial crimes. And we have both of you as witnesses. Richard Winters has just become one of the Treasury Department's most wanted fugitives. But he still got away," I said, the reality of the situation sinking in. "With who knows how much money." "For now," Rodriguez acknowledged. "But men like your husband make mistakes eventually. His lifestyle, his arrogance, he won't be able to stay hidden forever. And when he surfaces, we'll be waiting." In the days that followed, the full extent of Richard's operations came to light. The investigation revealed a sophisticated money laundering network spanning 3 continents, with tens of millions moved through shell companies and real estate investments. My role as the unsuspecting wife provided him the perfect cover of respectability, while his multiple romantic entanglements, of which Sophia and I were just 2, gave him plausible explanations for his global movements. Jennifer worked tirelessly to secure my financial interests, successfully arguing that I had been an unwitting victim of Richard's schemes. The courts granted me ownership of our primary residence and several legitimate investments that had not been tainted by his criminal activities. It wasn't the lifestyle I had become accustomed to, but it was more than enough to start over. Sophia and I maintained an unusual friendship, bonded by our shared experience. Her testimony proved invaluable to the federal investigation, and her banking expertise helped authorities identify additional hidden accounts connected to Richard's network. She eventually returned to her career, more cautious but also more determined to use her skills for good. As for Richard, he remained a ghost. Occasional sightings were reported, Dubai, Singapore, Buenos Aires, but he always vanished before authorities could close in. His face appeared on international watch lists and financial crime bulletins. His empire had crumbled, his freedom restricted to countries with lax extradition laws and a tolerance for wealthy criminals. 6 months after his disappearance, I finally returned to the home we had shared, now legally mine alone. The house felt different, cleaner somehow, as if Richard's deception had been a physical presence that had finally been exorcised. I had redecorated, replacing the cold minimalism he had preferred with warmer colors and comfortable furnishings that reflected my own taste. As I settled into my home office, formerly Richard's sacred space, my phone rang with an unknown international number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Eleanor. Richard's voice, slightly distorted by distance but unmistakable. You've redecorated. The blue chairs in the living room are a nice touch. Ice shot through my veins as I realized the implication He was watching me somehow. "What do you want, Richard?" "Just checking in on my wife. You're looking well. Financial freedom suits you." I moved away from the windows, scanning the room for hidden cameras. "I'm not your wife anymore. The divorce was finalized last month." Technicality. We both know relationships like ours don't end with legal paperwork. Ours ended the moment Sophia sent me those photos, I countered, trying to keep him talking while I texted Rodriguez with my free hand. Or maybe it ended years earlier, when you decided I was more useful as a cover story than a partner. He chuckled, the sound sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Always so perceptive, Ellie. It's what I loved about you, you know. Your mind. That analytical brilliance you were so eager to set aside for our marriage." "Where are you, Richard?" "Somewhere. Warm. Somewhere without extradition. Somewhere I can watch the authorities chase their tails while I rebuild what you helped destroy." "I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself." "Perhaps." His tone shifted, becoming harder. "But I haven't forgotten your role in all this. The cars you sold, the accounts you froze, the life you dismantled. Actions have consequences, Eleanor." "Is that a threat?" "A reminder. You're never completely beyond my reach." From outside came the sound of vehicles arriving. Rodriguez and her team responding to my text. Richard must have heard it too. "Your federal friends are prompt," he observed. "Give Agent Rodriguez my regards. Let her know I look forward to continuing our game in the coming years." "This isn't a game, Richard, isn't it? I have resources you'll never find, connections beyond your imagination. And now, I have nothing. But time to plan my next moves." His voice softened to a near whisper. "Sleep well, Ellie, and do check those new blue chairs carefully. I've left you a little remembrance." The line went dead as federal agents burst through my front door, weapons drawn. Within minutes, the house was being swept for surveillance devices and explosives, while I sat trembling in the kitchen, Richard's words echoing in my mind. By evening, they had found it, a sophisticated surveillance system hidden within the furniture I had purchased just last week. The delivery company had no record of tampering, suggesting Richard had connections even here, in my new beginning. "We'll need to move you again," Rodriguez said apologetically. "Different house, different city, possibly a new identity until we apprehend him." I looked around at the home I had reclaimed, the life I was trying to rebuild from the ashes of Richard's deception. "No," I said firmly. "I won't let him chase me from my own life. Not again." "Mrs. Winters," Rodriguez began, using my married name out of habit. "Richard has demonstrated both the means and the motivation to potentially harm you. We can't guarantee your safety if you remain such a visible target. Then don't guarantee it. Enhance it." I straightened my shoulders, feeling a resolve that had been building since the night I first saw those vacation photos. If I disappear, he wins. If I spend my life looking over my shoulder, he wins. I won't give him that satisfaction. Rodriguez studied me thoughtfully. "What do you propose instead?" "Make me the bait," I said simply. "He can't resist demonstrating his power over me. Use that. Track him through his attempts to surveil me. Catch him when his arrogance makes him careless." It was a dangerous gambit, but ultimately, the authorities agreed. My home was outfitted with state-of-the-art security and counter-surveillance measures. I resumed my career in financial analysis, now specializing in identifying patterns consistent with money laundering operations. My personal experience had given me insights that made me particularly effective at spotting the subtle indicators of criminal financial networks. Richard continued his cat-and-mouse game for nearly 2 years, occasionally making contact to remind me he was watching, always from just beyond the reach of law enforcement. Each communication helped authorities narrow down his possible locations, each taunting message bringing them one step closer. It was Sophia who ultimately provided the key to his downfall. While reviewing transaction records for a high-net-worth client at her bank, she noticed a pattern identical to Richard's methods, a specific sequence of transfers designed to obscure the source of funds. The client was a Malaysian businessman who frequently traveled to a private island resort in the Philippines. 3 weeks later, international authorities raided the resort, capturing Richard as he attempted to flee by seaplane. The man who had once commanded respect in Boston's financial circles was brought back in handcuffs, his carefully constructed facade permanently shattered. I attended his arraignment, seated quietly at the back of the courtroom. He spotted me immediately, his eyes locking with mine across the crowded space. For a moment, I glimpsed something unexpected in his expression. Not hatred or arrogance, but something almost like admiration. Later, as he was being led away, he paused near where I sat. "You won, Ellie," he said softly. "I underestimated you. I won't make that mistake again." "There won't be an again, Richard," I replied evenly. "Your game is over." He smiled, that charming, confidence-inspiring smile that had once made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. No game ever truly ends. It just changes players. As they escorted him out, Sophia joined me in the courtroom, slipping into the seat beside me. "Is it really over?" she asked. I watched the door close behind the man who had deceived us both, who had built an empire on lies and manipulation, who had underestimated the women he thought he had controlled. "Yes," I said, with certainty. "This chapter is over, and now we get to write the next ones ourselves." Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements about the sensational case. The high-flying financier, his double life, the millions hidden around the world. But the real story I knew wasn't about Richard at all. It was about rediscovery, of strength, of independence, of the woman I had been before him and the stronger woman I had become because of him. I had lost a husband, but found myself. I had uncovered a betrayal, but discovered my resilience. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the most valuable thing you can sell isn't a Ferrari or a Porsche, but the illusion that someone else controls your worth. Richard would spend decades in federal prison. His empire had crumbled. His millions were mostly confiscated or frozen. But I, the wife he had underestimated, the woman whose financial acumen he had dismissed, the partner he had betrayed, I was free, whole, and finally, indisputably, my own. 3 years after Richard's arrest, I sat across from Barbara Walters in her Manhattan studio, the bright lights warming my face as makeup artists made final touches before our interview went live. 2 minutes, Ms. Winters, called the producer. Actually, it's Ms. Harrington now, I corrected gently, having reclaimed my maiden name after the divorce was finalized, Eleanor Harrington. The producer nodded apologetically, making a note on her clipboard. Barbara leaned toward me during the brief pause. "Are you sure you're comfortable discussing everything?" she asked with genuine concern. "Once we air this, your story will be everywhere. The book launch will attract even more attention." I smoothed the lapel of my emerald green blazer, a power color I'd chosen deliberately for this occasion. "I'm ready, Barbara. It's time people heard the truth directly from me, not just the sensationalized headlines." The truth had become a complicated commodity in the years since Richard's dramatic capture. Media outlets had spun the story in countless directions, portraying me as everything from a clueless victim to a calculating co-conspirator who'd turned on her husband to save herself. The upcoming release of my memoir, The Perfect Facade, How I Discovered My Husband's Double Life and reclaimed my own, was my chance to finally set the record straight. 30 seconds, announced the producer. Barbara arranged her notes and adjusted her earpiece. "We'll start with the basics, then move to the emotional journey, and finally discuss your work with the Financial Crimes Task Force." Just as we rehearsed. I nodded, taking a deep breath as the countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2. Good evening and welcome to a special edition of 2020, Barbara began, her iconic voice immediately commanding attention. Tonight, we speak exclusively with Eleanor Harrington, whose shocking discovery of her husband's betrayal led to the unraveling of one of the most sophisticated financial crime networks in recent history. Eleanor, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, Barbara. Let's begin with the day that changed everything. The moment you received those vacation photos from your husband's mistress. What went through your mind? I had answered this question dozens of times in court testimonies and depositions, but never publicly, never for millions of viewers. Initially, disbelief, I replied honestly. When you've built a life with someone for 11 years, there's this instinct to deny evidence that contradicts everything you thought was true. But beneath that disbelief was something else, a voice that whispered, "This explains so much." All those small inconsistencies I'd rationalized away suddenly formed a clear pattern. You've written in your book that you actually felt a strange sense of clarity in that moment. Yes. It was like having a foggy lens suddenly wiped clean. I could see not just the affairs, but how systematically Richard had isolated me from my career, my financial independence, even my confidence in my own perceptions. That clarity became my strength. The interview continued as we navigated through the timeline of events, my investigation, the federal involvement, Richard's attempted escape, and eventually his capture. Barbara was masterful at drawing out the emotional nuances without veering into sensationalism. Your former husband is currently serving a 27-year sentence for money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud, Barbara noted. Have you had any contact with him since his imprisonment? I hesitated, conscious that my answer would likely make headlines. Yes, once. 6 months after his sentencing, I visited him at the federal penitentiary. Why? I needed closure, to see him in that environment, stripped of his power and pretense. I needed to look him in the eye as equals, not as the manipulator and the manipulated. And what was that meeting like? I recalled the sterile visitation room, the jumpsuit that had replaced Richard's bespoke suits, the way his charismatic smile seemed hollow without his usual trappings of wealth and status. Surprisingly anticlimactic, I answered truthfully. The man I saw there was just a man. Not the mythical figure who had dominated my life for so long. He tried to maintain his air of superiority, suggesting he still had hidden resources, connections who would eventually secure his release. But I could see the truth. He was afraid. Afraid of the years stretching ahead of him. Afraid of the legacy he'd leave behind. Most of all, afraid that he'd become irrelevant. Did he express remorse? For the betrayal? If not for his crimes? No. Richard doesn't believe he betrayed me. He believes he elevated me. In his mind, I should have been grateful for the lifestyle his activities provided, regardless of the deception involved. His only regret was getting caught. The interview shifted to my life after Richard, my return to finance, my collaboration with federal authorities, and eventually the foundation I'd established to help partners of white-collar criminals rebuild their lives. The Reclamation Project has assisted over 200 individuals in the past 2 years, Barbara noted, referring to my nonprofit. What's the most important lesson you try to impart to these people? That they aren't defined by someone else's deception, I said without hesitation. So many partners of financial criminals are treated as either complicit or hopelessly naive. They lose their social circles, their financial security, and often their sense of self. We provide practical support, legal guidance, financial literacy, training, career counseling, but most importantly, we remind them that they get to write the next chapter of their own stories. As the interview concluded, Barbara asked the question I'd been anticipating. Eleanor, your book details how selling your husband's beloved car collection was your first act of reclaiming power. Some critics have suggested this was merely vindictive, rather than empowering. How do you respond to that? I smiled, remembering the satisfaction of those early decisive actions when my world was crumbling around me. Those cars represented everything about our marriage, beautiful and valuable on the surface, but ultimately purchased with tainted money and maintained through deception. Selling them wasn't about revenge, it was about converting symbols of oppression into tools for liberation. I used that money to fund my legal defense and restart my life. I don't consider that vindictive. I consider it strategic. After the cameras stopped rolling, I thanked Barbara for her thoughtful approach to the interview. Her producer informed me that the segment would air the following week, coinciding with my book's release and my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee on strengthening financial crime detection. You were remarkably composed, Barbara commented as we gathered our things. Most people in your position would still harbor visible anger. Anger served its purpose, I replied. It fueled me when I needed strength, but holding on to it would mean Richard still had power over my emotional state. I've worked too hard to allow that. Outside the studio, Sophia was waiting for me. Our unlikely friendship had deepened over the years, forged in the crucible of shared betrayal and strengthened through mutual respect. She had become the chief compliance officer at her bank, using her intimate knowledge of Richard's methods to overhaul their fraud detection systems. "How did it go?" she asked, falling into step beside me as we walked toward the waiting car. "Well, I think." Barbara was fair, didn't dwell too much on the sensational aspects. "Unlike the Netflix producers," Sophia remarked with a wry smile, referring to the streaming service's recent docuseries about Richard's crimes. "They called again, by the way. They want us both for season 2, The Women Who Brought Him Down." Laughed. "Still a hard pass from me. I don't need Ryan Murphy casting some actress to dramatize my trauma." Agreed. Though I wouldn't mind being played by Zendaya. Our driver navigated through Manhattan traffic as Sophia and I reviewed my schedule. For the coming weeks, book signings, speaking engagements, legislative testimony. My life had taken an unexpected turn into public advocacy, using my experience to push for regulatory reforms and support systems for families affected by financial crimes. Jennifer called, Sophia mentioned, referring to my attorney who had become a close friend. The final asset distribution from the civil forfeiture has been approved. The Trust for Victims of Richard's Schemes will receive approximately $12 million. That's less than we hoped, I noted, thinking of the hundreds of individuals and businesses that had been damaged by Richard's operations. But more than they might have received without your testimony, Sophia reminded me gently. And speaking of unexpected funds, you received another letter from Richard's mother. I sighed, thinking of Evelyn Winters, the elegant, steel-spined woman who had raised Richard to believe in his own exceptionalism and who had initially blamed me for his downfall. Our relationship had evolved in surprising ways after his arrest. What does she want now? The same as before. She's revised her will again and wants to ensure you won't contest the provisions she's made for you. Despite our tumultuous beginning, Evelyn had eventually recognized the depth of her son's deception. In a surprising twist, she had amended her considerable estate plan to include me, a decision Richard had fought bitterly from prison, even attempting to have his mother declared mentally incompetent when she refused to exclude me. Tell her what I've told her before. I don't want or need her money. She should donate it to the Victims Fund. She won't. She's surprisingly stubborn about this. Wonder where Richard got that quality, I mused, as our car pulled up to the upscale Greenwich Village building where I'd purchased a loft after selling the Boston house that held too many memories of my former life. The doorman greeted me by name as we entered, and I felt the familiar sense of gratitude for this new life I'd built. One where I made every decision, where every space reflected my true preferences, not the curated aesthetic Richard had imposed. My loft was open and airy, with walls of books, comfortable furniture, and large windows overlooking a small courtyard garden. It was nothing like the minimalist showcase home I'd maintained during my marriage. This space was genuinely mine. "Agent Rodriguez called," Sophia said, scrolling through messages on her phone as we settled in my kitchen. "Apparently Richard has been transferred to a different facility." Agent Rodriguez had remained in my life long after the official investigation concluded, first as my protection detail, and eventually as a friend. Her tenacity had been instrumental in tracking Richard's hidden assets across continents. Did she say why? He was apparently using his influence over other inmates to continue some business operations. They've moved him to a higher security location with stricter communication monitoring. I shook my head, unsurprised. 3 years in prison, and he's still trying to manipulate the world around him. "Some people never change," Sophia observed, accepting the glass of wine I offered her. "Though some change dramatically." Speaking of which, I received an interesting call from Melissa yesterday. Melissa, Richard's London-based mistress, had initially refused to cooperate with authorities, maintaining that her relationship with Richard had been genuine and exclusive. She had eventually become another valuable witness after discovering the extent of his deceptions. What did she want? To let us know she's engaged. Apparently, she's found someone completely different from Richard in every way. An environmental lawyer with no fashion sense and complete financial transparency. I smiled, genuinely happy that another woman had found healing after Richard's manipulation. Good for her. She also asked if we'd consider meeting her when she's in New York next month. Says she feels like we're the only ones who truly understand what she went through. "The Richard Survivors Club," I said with a sardonic smile. "We should get jackets made." Sophia laughed, but there was understanding in her eyes. The bond between those of us who had been intimate parts of Richard's deception was complex. Not quite friendship in the traditional sense, but a profound connection nonetheless. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize but answered out of habit. Unknown callers could be witnesses or victims related to ongoing legal proceedings. "Eleanor Harrington," I answered professionally. "Ms. Harrington, this is Warden Collins from Federal Correctional Institution Cumberland. I'm calling regarding inmate Richard Winters." My blood chilled. Prison officials never called directly unless something significant had happened. "Yes?" "There's been an incident. Mr. Winters attempted to escape during his transfer to our facility." Sophia, seeing my expression change, moved closer with concern. "Was he successful?" I asked, my voice steady despite the sudden pounding of my heart. "No, ma'am. The attempt was thwarted. However, he sustained injuries during the apprehension. He's currently in the prison medical facility in stable condition." I exhaled slowly. "I appreciate you informing me, Warden. But may I ask why?" "I'm his ex-wife, not his emergency contact." There was a slight pause. "Because he had materials in his possession that referenced you, Ms. Harrington. Detailed plans regarding what he intended to do once he secured his freedom. Given the nature of these materials, we felt obligated to warn you. The implication was clear. Even from prison, Richard was obsessing over me, perhaps planning revenge." "I understand. Thank you for the call, Warden. Please keep me informed of any developments." After ending the call, I relayed the conversation to Sophia, who immediately reached for her own phone. "I'm calling Rodriguez. Your security needs to be reassessed." "Sophia, don't Sophia me," she interrupted firmly. "You know as well as I do that Richard doesn't give up. If he was willing to risk additional prison time with an escape attempt, his obsession has only intensified." She was right, of course. Throughout the trials and hearings, Richard's focus had increasingly shifted from his legal predicament to me personally. His initial attempts to charm or intimidate me had evolved into a fixation when those tactics failed. His legal team had been forced to physically restrain him during my testimony when my detailed account of discovering his fraudulent activities had demolished his carefully constructed defense. While Sophia contacted Rodriguez, I moved to my office, unlocking the PAW, safe where I kept important documents. Inside was a sealed envelope I hadn't opened in over a year. Richard's last letter, sent before prison officials restricted his communication with me. I broke the seal now, needing to remind myself of his mindset, his patterns. The letter was, "Typical Richard, alternating between charm and veiled threats, professions of unique understanding and promises of eventual reckoning." The final paragraph remained as disturbing as when I'd first read it. "You think you've won, Ellie, but you've merely postponed the inevitable. No prison can hold me forever. No distance can truly separate what we built together. You were, are, and always will be mine. When you least expect it, when you finally convinced yourself you're free of me, I'll return to remind you of that. Truth. Every night before you sleep, remember, I'm patient, I'm resourceful, and I never forget a debt." I had dismissed these words as the impotent raging of a narcissist facing decades of confinement. Now, with news of his escape attempt, they carried renewed menace. Sophia returned to my office, her expression grim. "Rodriguez is on her way. She wants you to pack for a few days, just until they can assess the security situation." "I'm not running again," I said firmly, placing the letter back in the safe. "I have commitments, the book launch, the Senate testimony. If I disappear now, it suggests I'm still afraid of him. This isn't about fear. It's about prudence. Richard nearly escaped today. His obsession with you hasn't diminished." "All the more reason to maintain my visible presence," I countered. "If I continue exactly as planned, the message is clear. He has no power to disrupt my life anymore." Our debate was interrupted by the arrival of Agent Rodriguez, who entered with the no-nonsense efficiency I'd come to expect from her. She assessed my loft with professional scrutiny before addressing me. "Eleanor, we need to talk about Richard's escape attempt and what it means for your security going forward." For the next hour, she outlined what they knew. Richard had meticulously cultivated relationships with specific prison personnel, exploiting their personal financial troubles to gain their cooperation. The attempt had been sophisticated, involving coordinated timing, external accomplices, and significant financial resources that should have been inaccessible to him. "How is he still accessing funds?" I asked. "I thought all his known accounts were frozen or seized." "That's what concerns us," Rodriguez admitted. "Either he had resources we never identified, or he's established new financial pipelines from inside prison. Both scenarios suggest he still has outside help, loyal associates continuing his operations." The implications were disturbing. Richard's network had been dismantled years ago, or so we believed. If elements remained operational, the threat extended beyond just me. "What about Sophia?" I asked. "Or Melissa, or any of the other witnesses?" "We're implementing security precautions for everyone connected to his case," Rodriguez assured me. "But you were his primary target according to the materials we recovered. He had your daily schedule, information about your security measures, even floor plans of this building." I felt a cold shiver despite myself. The idea that Richard had been studying my movements from his prison cell, methodically planning to re-enter my life, was profoundly unsettling. "So what now?" I asked. "Do I put my life on hold again? Cancel the book tour? Disappear into another safe house?" Rodriguez shook her head. "Actually, we're recommending something different this time. While Richard recovers from his injuries and faces additional charges for the escape attempt, we have a unique opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" "To set the board pieces exactly where we want them," she replied. "Continue with your plans, but with enhanced security that remains mostly invisible. Let Richard's remaining associates think their information is still accurate, that you're proceeding without awareness of the attempt. You want to use me as bait." "Again, not exactly," Rodriguez clarified. "We want to use Richard's obsession as leverage. He's made a critical error with this escape attempt, revealed that he still has resources we haven't identified. Now we follow those breadcrumbs back to his remaining network and dismantle it completely. As Rodriguez outlined the details of this new approach, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Once again, my life was being shaped by Richard's actions, my decisions influenced by his threats. Yet something was different this time. I wasn't reacting from a place of shock or betrayal. I was strategizing from a position of strength, with full awareness of what I was facing. All right, I agreed, finally. But on one condition. I want to visit him again, see him with his injuries, with this failure fresh in his mind. I want him to know that I know about the attempt, and that it changes nothing about my plans. Rodriguez and Sophia exchanged concerned glances. That's exactly what he wants, Sophia protested. Another chance to manipulate you, to re-establish some psychological connection. No, I corrected her. What he wants is to catch me unaware, to reclaim power through fear and unpredictability. By visiting him on my terms, I deny him that fantasy. I show him I'm confronting the threat directly, not running from it. Rodriguez considered this. It could work in our favor. A controlled interaction might provoke him into revealing something useful about his remaining network. As we finalized the details of this new security strategy, I found myself thinking about the woman I had been 4 years ago, the trusting wife who had believed in her husband's business trips and accepted his financial decisions without question. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from avoiding threats, but from walking directly toward them with open eyes. Richard had tried to cast me as a victim in his narrative, then as an adversary, now, perhaps, as an obsession. But the role I had claimed for myself, survivor, advocate, author of my own story, was one he could never control or diminish, no matter how many plots he hatched from behind prison walls. There's one more thing you should know, Rodriguez said as she prepared to leave. When they apprehended Richard, he was carrying something unusual. A set of car keys, replicas of the ones for the vehicles you sold. Apparently he had them, made in the prison workshop. A symbolic talisman of his first significant loss of control. Even now, years later, the sale of those precious cars remained a wound to his pride. A moment when I had first asserted power over his carefully constructed world. Keep them as evidence, I said, but take a photo for me. May I ask why? Rodriguez inquired. I smiled, thinking of the book cover my publisher and I had been debating for weeks. I think I just found the perfect image for my memoir. 3 days. After receiving news of Richard's escape attempt, I sat in the sterile visitors' room of the maximum security medical wing at Cumberland Federal Penitentiary. The cinder block walls were painted an institutional shade of beige, the fluorescent, lighting harsh and unforgiving. A thick plexiglass barrier separated visitors from inmates, a precaution that seemed particularly appropriate given recent events. Agent Rodriguez stood against the back wall, her presence both reassuring and necessary. She had vetted and approved every aspect of this meeting, from the exact questions I planned to ask to the navy blue blazer I wore, chosen specifically because Richard had always hated that color on me, claiming it made me look severe and unapproachable. Remember, Rodriguez said quietly, this isn't about getting closure or making him understand anything. This is about sending a message and potentially gathering intelligence. Keep emotional responses to a minimum. I nodded, arranging my features into what I hoped was a neutral expression. The door on the opposite side of the glass swung open, and Richard appeared, flanked by 2 guards. My first thought was that prison had aged him dramatically. The charismatic, impeccably groomed financial executive had been replaced by a gaunt figure with sunken cheeks and dull eyes. His prison jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame, and a fresh bandage covered one side of his face, evidence of the injuries sustained during his failed escape. Despite his diminished appearance, his eyes lit with disturbing intensity when he saw me. The guards guided him to the chair opposite mine, securing his handcuffs to a metal loop embedded in the table. Only when they stepped back did I pick up the telephone receiver that would allow us to communicate through the barrier. Richard mirrored my action, his lips curving into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise." "Is it?" I kept my voice level. "I'd think my visit was rather predictable after your little adventure during transport." His smile faltered. "Slightly. News travels fast. Attempted prison escapes make headlines, Richard. Especially when the prisoner is a notorious financial criminal with a flair for the dramatic." He leaned forward, wincing slightly from what must have been additional unseen injuries. "I'm touched by your concern. Coming all this way to check on my well-being." "I'm not here out of concern," I corrected him. "I'm here to make something perfectly clear. Your escape attempt changes nothing. My book will be published next week. My testimony before the Senate Banking Committee proceeds as scheduled. My life continues exactly as planned." A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed his features before he composed himself. "Always so direct. It's one of the qualities I admired in you, you know. Before you turned those analytical skills against me. I didn't come for a stroll down memory lane either. Why did you come then? Surely not just to tell me your schedule is unchanged. You could have sent a note." I studied him carefully, noting the calculated casualness of his posture, the way his eyes continuously assessed me, looking for vulnerabilities, emotional reactions, anything he could exploit. "I came to see for myself that you're back in custody, to verify that the security measures worked, and to let you know personally that I'm aware of what you were carrying when they caught you." His expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened around the phone receiver. And what might that have been? Replica car keys for the Ferrari, the Porsche, the Jaguar, the cars I sold the day I discovered your betrayal. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "Still bothers you, doesn't it? That first loss of control." For a moment, genuine anger flashed across his face before he masked it with a chuckle. "Those cars were merely possessions, Ellie. Replaceable. Unlike other things I've lost, nothing you lost wasn't directly the result of your own actions, Richard." "Perhaps." He tilted his head, studying me. "You look well. Success clearly agrees with you. The interviews, the book, the foundation. You've built quite the public profile from the ashes of our marriage. I've rebuilt my life. There's a difference." "Is there?" "From where I sit, you've simply replaced one performance with another. The dutiful corporate wife has become the crusading advocate, still playing a role designed to please an audience." Refused to take the bait. "Project all you want, Richard. Your opinion stopped mattering to me the moment I saw those vacation photos." He shifted strategies, his voice softening with practiced sincerity. "You know, in a strange way, I'm proud of you. The woman I married would never have had the courage to do what you've done, building a new identity, confronting powerful institutions. In some ways, my actions liberated you. The audacity of this statement would have infuriated me years ago. Now, it merely confirmed what I already knew about his pathological need to center himself in every narrative, to claim credit for outcomes regardless of his actual role." "Your actions revealed your true character," I replied evenly. My response to that revelation was entirely my own. One of the guards approached, informing us that we had 5 minutes remaining. Richard straightened in his chair, his demeanor shifting subtly. "I understand you've been in contact with my mother," he said, an edge entering his voice. "Accepting her charity despite your claims of independence. So this was the real purpose of his attempt to rattle me, to gauge my relationship with his mother and her fortune." "I haven't accepted anything from Evelyn," I replied truthfully. "She's made certain decisions about her estate that I've repeatedly asked her to reconsider. That's between you and her." "My mother is an elderly woman with deteriorating judgment," he snapped, the veneer of control slipping. "You've manipulated her, turned her against her only son while I'm unable to properly communicate with her. Evelyn has visited you monthly. For 3 years, Richard. She defended you publicly throughout your trial. If your relationship has changed, perhaps consider that she, like me, eventually recognized the truth about who you really are. His jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, I glimpsed the same cold rage I'd seen the night I confronted him with evidence of his affairs. It was a reminder that beneath the calculated charm and manipulative tactics lay something darker, a fundamental inability to accept any reality where he wasn't in control. "Time's up," announced the guard, approaching Richard's side of the barrier. Richard leaned forward, pressing his palm against the plexiglass. "This conversation isn't finished, Eleanor. It's merely paused." I deliberately left my hands in my lap. "No, Richard, it is finished. This is the last time I'll voluntarily be in the same room with you. Whatever fantasies you're nurturing about reconnection or reconciliation or revenge, let them go. They'll never become reality." As the guards began to unlock his restraints, from the table, Richard's composure fractured completely. He lunged toward the barrier, his face contorted with fury. "You think you're free of me?" he hissed into the receiver. "You'll never be free. Everything you are now exists because of me. Your foundation, your advocacy, your precious book, they all have me at their center. I'm still controlling the narrative of your life, Eleanor. And I always will." I stood calmly, replacing the receiver in its cradle as the guards restrained him. His mouth continued moving, shouting words I could no longer hear, and chose not to read on his lips. I turned my back and walked toward the exit where Rodriguez waited, Richard's impotent rage fading. Behind me. "You got what you needed?" I asked as we moved through security checkpoints toward the exit. "More than expected," Rodriguez confirmed. "He lost control completely at the end. That reference to your foundation having him at the center, it suggests he might have been trying to infiltrate or monitor your organization. We'll investigate all your staff and volunteers immediately." Outside in the parking lot, the October air felt crisp and cleansing after the stifling atmosphere of the prison. I took a deep breath, surprised by my own emotional state. I had expected to feel shaken after the confrontation, perhaps even frightened by Richard's threats. Instead, I felt strangely liberated, as if the last lingering power he held over me had finally dissipated. "Are you all right?" Rodriguez asked as we reached the car. That got intense at the end. "I'm fine," I replied, realizing it was true. In fact, I think that went exactly as it needed to. "How so?" "I needed to see him as he truly is, not the mythologized version my mind created over years of trying to understand what happened. Not the charismatic manipulator who nearly destroyed me. Just a bitter, aging man in a prison jumpsuit, still, unable to accept responsibility for his own downfall." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully as she started the car. "Well, his reaction certainly gave us investigative leads to pursue. The technical team is already analyzing the recording for any coded messages or unintentional revelations about his network. There was nothing coded about his fixation on his mother's money," I observed. "That seemed to be what really got under his skin." "We'll follow up with Evelyn Winters again," Rodriguez agreed. "Check if she's experienced any unusual contact or pressure from individuals connected to Richard." The 2-hour drive back to New York passed mostly in comfortable silence. I used the time to prepare mentally for my book launch event scheduled for the following evening, a conversation with a prominent journalist at an upscale Manhattan bookstore, followed by a signing session. Enhanced security measures would be in place, but to the public, everything would appear normal. As we approached the city, Rodriguez received a call that she took through the car's speaker system. "Rodriguez here. Go ahead." "Ma'am, we've completed the preliminary analysis of the prison visitor logs for inmate Winters," reported a male voice. "Something concerning has emerged. 3 weeks ago, he was visited by a woman using credentials, identifying her as Sarah Reynolds, his former executive assistant." I sat up straighter. Sarah Reynolds had been a peripheral figure in the investigation. interviewed multiple times but never charged. She had claimed minimal knowledge of Richard's illegal activities and insufficient evidence had existed to prove otherwise. "That's impossible," I interjected. "Sarah Reynolds relocated to Australia 2 years ago. I received a Christmas card from Sydney last December." "Exactly the issue, ma'am," the agent continued. "We've confirmed Reynolds is indeed still in Australia. Someone used her identity to gain access to Winters." "Do we have surveillance footage of this visitor?" Rodriguez asked sharply. "Yes, ma'am. Facial recognition is running now. But there's more. Phone records show calls between the prison and a burner phone purchased in Manhattan immediately following this visit, the same burner phone that was later used to make calls to the service entrance of Ms. Harrington's building." A chill ran through me. "Someone's been watching my building? From the service entrance?" "It appears so. We're pulling additional surveillance footage now and have increased the undercover presence around your residence." Rodriguez's expression had hardened into professional focus. "Accelerate all security protocols. I want the visitor identified within the hour. And Eleanor," she added, glancing at me, "we need to consider postponing tomorrow's book launch." "No," I said firmly. "That's exactly what Richard wants, to disrupt my life, to make me react out of fear. We increase security, certainly, but we proceed as planned." After additional discussion with her team, Rodriguez reluctantly agreed that the event could continue with significantly enhanced security measures. By the time we reached my building, plainclothes agents were already positioned at strategic points throughout the area, and a thorough sweep of my loft had been completed. "All clear, but we found this," reported the lead security agent, holding up a small electronic device. "Professional-grade listening device, recently installed in your home office, sophisticated enough to bypass standard security sweeps." Rodriguez examined the device with a grim expression. "This is high-end surveillance equipment, not something an ordinary person could acquire." Richard's remaining network, I surmised. "He may be in prison, but he clearly still has resources and people willing to act on his behalf." The rest of the evening became a flurry of additional security measures, changing locks, installing new monitoring systems, establishing safe words and emergency protocols. Through it all, I maintained an outward calm that masked my inner turmoil. Just when I had begun to believe I was truly free of Richard's shadow, evidence emerged that he could still reach into my life, still threaten my hard-won security. Sophia arrived shortly after I returned, bringing dinner and moral support. As we ate in my newly secured loft, I recounted the prison visit and subsequent security concerns. "You confronted him, discovered someone impersonated Sarah to visit him, and found a listening device in your home, all in one day," Sophia summarized, shaking her head. "And yet you still want to proceed with the book launch tomorrow?" "More than ever," I confirmed. "Richard thrives on creating fear and uncertainty. Canceling or postponing would tell him and his associates that their tactics are working." "It's not worth risking your safety to prove a point," Sophia argued. "It's not about proving a point. It's about living my life on my terms, not Richard's." "Besides," I added, "with the security measures Rodriguez has implemented, I'll probably be safer at the bookstore than anywhere else in New York." Sophia didn't look convinced, but she knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was made up. Instead of arguing further, she shifted to practical matters, helping me prepare for the launch, reviewing talking points, selecting appropriate attire, and ensuring I was ready for potentially difficult questions from the audience. Late that night, after Sophia had departed and the security team had established their overnight positions, I sat alone in my bedroom, reflecting on the day's events. Seeing Richard in prison, diminished yet still dangerous, had been unsettling in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not because he still frightened me, but because a small, unwelcome part of me had felt pity for him, for the brilliant mind now confined to plotting petty schemes from a cell, for the charismatic personality reduced to impotent rage behind plexiglass. That unexpected pity troubled me. Richard deserved his punishment. His crimes had harmed countless people. His betrayal had nearly destroyed me. Yet seeing him so reduced had momentarily complicated my narrative of righteous justice. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "He's not worth your pity, Eleanor. Trust me on that. E.W. Evelyn Winters." Somehow, Richard's mother had anticipated the emotional complexity I was experiencing. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, and I certainly hadn't mentioned my prison visit. Yet her timing was impeccable, her insight uncanny. I hesitated, then replied, "How did you know?" Her response came quickly. "Because I felt the same when I first visited him. That moment of weakness passes. Remember who he truly is, not who he pretends to be." Evelyn's relationship with her son had evolved dramatically since his arrest. Initially his staunchest defender, she had gradually come to accept the evidence of his crimes. Unlike me, however, she maintained regular contact with him. Monthly visits that she described as a mother's obligation, not a character endorsement. Our own relationship had transformed from mutual suspicion to reluctant respect to something approaching friendship. She had eventually apologized for her initial hostility toward me, acknowledging that she had enabled Richard's sense of entitlement throughout his life. "Will you be at the launch tomorrow?" I texted, knowing she had received an invitation but had not yet confirmed. Front row. Let him hear about it from every visitor. Show him what resilience truly means. I smiled at her combative spirit. At 78, Evelyn Winters remained a formidable presence, elegant, sharp-witted, and increasingly determined to make amends for her role in Richard's development. "Thank you, Evelyn, for understanding. Sleep well, Eleanor. Tomorrow is your day, not his." As I prepared for bed, Rodriguez sent a final update. The facial recognition program had identified the woman who had impersonated Sarah Reynolds during the prison visit. Carla Mendez, former administrative assistant at Morgan Financial, during Richard's tenure there. Initial investigation revealed unusual deposits to her account, corresponding with Richard's escape attempt timeline. I added this new name to my mental map of Richard's remaining network. Individuals who, for reasons of loyalty or financial incentive, continued to serve his interests despite his imprisonment. The web was larger than we had imagined, which made the work of my foundation even more crucial. For every Richard Winters brought to justice, there remained associates, enablers, and accomplices still operating in the shadows. Tomorrow's book launch wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a public statement about bringing financial crimes into the light, about helping those affected rebuild their lives, about transforming victimization into advocacy. Richard and his associates might be watching, might even be planning further disruptions, but they would not dictate the narrative. Morning arrived with a text from Rodriguez. Security in place. All systems go. Car arriving at 9:30. The day of my book launch had arrived. As I dressed in a tailored crimson suit, a color chosen deliberately for its associations with power and resilience, I thought about how far I had come from that night 4 years ago, staring in shock at vacation, photos of my husband with another woman. That devastating moment of discovery had been just the beginning, the first thread pulled in a tapestry of deception that had unraveled to reveal financial crimes, multiple identities, and a network of manipulation that spanned continents. I had lost my marriage, my home, my sense of security, and the future I had envisioned. But in their place, I had found my voice, my purpose, my true strength, and authentic relationships built on honesty rather than convenience or facade. The journey had been brutal at times, but the woman who emerged was infinitely stronger than the one who had begun it. My phone rang. Jennifer calling for a final pre-launch pep talk. "Ready to tell your story to the world?" "More than ready," I replied, glancing at the finished copy of my book on the nightstand. its cover featuring a striking image of luxury car keys partially obscured by shadow. It's time everyone heard the truth. Not just about Richard, Jennifer reminded me, but about how the system fails partners of white-collar criminals, about how financial abuse intertwines with emotional manipulation, about rebuilding when your entire life has been revealed as a construction of lies. Exactly. This was never just about exposing Richard. He'll hate that most of all. Jennifer observed with satisfaction that you've transformed his betrayal into something meaningful for others, something that extends far beyond him. After ending the call, I moved to my window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline bathed in morning light. Somewhere out there, people would be lining up for my book signing. Media outlets would be preparing coverage of the launch. Individuals affected by financial crimes might be finding hope in the advance reviews that praised the book's practical guidance for survivors. And yes, associates of Richard might be watching, reporting back to him, perhaps even planning further attempts to undermine me. But that knowledge no longer generated fear, only a steely determination to continue the work I had begun. The intercom buzzed, announcing the arrival of my security detail. I gathered my things, took one last look around, my loft, and stepped toward the door. "Let's go," I told the agents waiting in the hallway. "It's time to turn the page." The bookstore was packed beyond capacity, faces turned expectantly toward the small stage where I sat beside Catherine Porter, the Pulitzer-winning journalist moderating the launch. Cameras flashed as I spoke about the journey from betrayed wife to advocate, my voice steady despite the gravity of the topics we covered. "The most dangerous aspect of financial criminals," I explained to the rapt audience, "is not just their theft of money, but their theft of truth. The way they convince those closest to them to disbelieve their own perceptions." In the front row, just as promised, sat Evelyn Winters, elegant in navy blue, her silver hair immaculately styled. Beside her was Sophia, and next to Sophia, surprisingly, Melissa from London, who had flown in specifically for this event. 3. Women connected by one man's deception, now united in something stronger than victimhood. Rodriguez's team maintained a discreet presence throughout the venue, communicating via nearly invisible earpieces. So far, the event had proceeded without incident, but I remained alert to any unusual movements or faces in the crowd. "Ms. Harrington," Catherine asked, "your foundation focuses specifically on helping partners rebuild after financial crimes are exposed. Why that particular focus?" "Because when the headlines fade and the criminal is sentenced, those left behind face a unique devastation, not just financial ruin, but profound questions about their own judgment and reality. They need specialized support that traditional victim services often can't provide." As I elaborated on the Foundation's work, a commotion near the back of the room caught my attention. Security personnel moved swiftly toward the disturbance as murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Please continue," Catherine encouraged, professional enough to maintain the flow despite the interruption. I had just resumed my point when Rodriguez appeared at the side of the stage, her expression calm but her posture alert. She gave me a subtle nod that communicated success. Whatever threat had emerged had been contained. Later, I would learn that Carla Mendez, the woman who had impersonated Sarah Reynolds, had attempted to enter the event carrying a package. Security had intercepted her before she could get within 50 feet of the building. The package contained not a weapon, as initially feared, but a recording device and a letter from Richard, a final attempt to insert himself into this milestone. The launch continued seamlessly, the audience unaware of the drama that had unfolded at the perimeter. I signed books for hours afterward, meeting survivors who shared their stories in hushed tones, financial professionals seeking to better protect their clients, and journalists hoping for exclusive insights into Richard's criminal enterprise. As the event wound down, Evelyn approached my table, waiting until the last attendee had departed before speaking. "He was watching, you know," she said quietly. I arranged for the event to be live-streamed to the prison library. He saw everything: your composure, your impact, the line of people waiting for your signature. He saw what you've become without him. Was that cruel or kind? I asked, genuinely curious about her motivation. Neither. It was necessary. For him and for you. Some lessons can only be learned through unavoidable truth. She placed a hand briefly over mine. The cars were just possessions, Eleanor, but what you've built from their sale, that's a legacy. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of a congressional hearing room, testifying on proposed legislation that would provide greater protections and resources for families impacted by financial crimes. The bill, informally known as the Harrington Act, incorporated many of the recommendations developed through my foundation's work. Richard remained in prison, his network thoroughly dismantled, his remaining assets seized and redistributed to victims. His attempts to reach me had ceased after the book launch. Whether from resignation or new strategic patience, I couldn't be sure. As I concluded my testimony, I noticed a familiar face in the gallery, the anonymous Instagram user who had sent those vacation photos 4 years ago. Sophia, now officially my friend, rather than my husband's mistress, gave me a subtle thumbs up as I stepped away from the microphone. Some might call it karma or poetic justice that Richard's attempt to juggle multiple lives had ultimately led to their collaboration against him. I simply called it reclamation, of truth, of power, and most importantly, of my own story. The cars were long gone, the husband was locked away, but I was still driving forward, and the road ahead was entirely my own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.